Hi there, welcome to the second section of Chapter 1. We're going to be talking about the broad strokes of your series. Now, a series script is really like a blueprint or a roadmap. And with any good roadmap, you should have an objective in mind of where you want to go. So let's talk a little bit about why you're writing this script. We discussed it in the previous section about inspiration, but now let's talk about it in terms of practicality. Now, to me, there's probably 3 reasons that you have this course and you want to write this script. First, maybe you just want to do this for fun, just to try it out and see how it goes. Secondly, maybe you found a contest or festival that you'd like to enter. Or third, maybe you want to get this produced. Maybe you want to shoot this series yourself, or you're working with another producer or development executive. So with those 3 parameters in mind, let's talk about how you approach the script and the writing process a little bit differently. First, if this is for fun or it's just a portfolio piece, hopefully you can kind of lean back and embrace the creative process here. It should be a little bit liberating. There's no creative constraints except for the ones that you're putting on yourself. Now, if you found a contest or festival, of course, just make sure that you're following the guidelines of that particular festival. Sometimes people ask, what type of script should I write for that? What's going to work best to get me noticed? If you talk to any festival judge or anyone putting on one of those contests, they'll tell you, we don't know until we get it. So really don't look at past winners. Just write what you enjoy, and I'm sure the judges will agree. One festival quickly I'd like to recommend is the New York Television Festival. Despite the name, they do a lot of great work with web series creators. They pair up with the Sci-Fi network, for example, so that's one that you might want to check out. And lastly, maybe you want to produce this. Like I said, whether you're doing this your own or you're working with a producing partner, there's a couple things that you should think about. So for a moment, we're going to take off our writer hat, put on our producer hat. Think about, do you have a location in mind that you're specifically going to shoot this series? Do you have some actors that you have worked with before that you want to work with again? Are there other parameters that are sort of being put on this project from the beginning? Keep those in mind. And don't think of them as constraints, though. Think of them as creative opportunities. To me, the better of the 2 Star Wars trilogies was the first one, because Lucas didn't have a lot of money. He didn't have all those green screen resources to use. He sort of had to think on his feet and make stuff up as he went to use what he had. And you can really find some great opportunities there, I think. So like I said, the screenplay that I'm going to be writing along with you guys, I'm just doing it for fun. I don't have a mind to produce it, so I'm just going to kind of lean back and have a little bit of fun with the process with you. So let's put that writer hat back on and think about why you want to do this as a web series. As you know, of course, you can do a feature film, you can write a television pilot, you could write a novel or a comic. So why do you think the web series format is going to be best for you? There's a couple things that I like about it. Of course, worldwide distribution. You can get your work seen by anyone, anywhere. And what's cool about that too is there's so much audience engagement, Whether you put your show on YouTube or wherever it lives, I'm sure people can leave comments, they can find you on Facebook, they can find you on Twitter, and you can get a dialogue going with your audience in a way that you really can't, I don't think, with other formats. As I mentioned before, web series goes with a serialized storytelling format. So that means even if you're doing it in sort of bite-sized web series episodes, it's kind of a longer form than just a feature film, which essentially just tells one story. You can tell many stories. You can have many different characters coming in and out, and you can really spend a lot of time in these cool worlds that you're creating. And lastly, there are no rules. That to me is one of the most exciting aspects of web series. It's evolving every day. There's producers and creators, independent celebrities, big names or not, and they're all having various degrees of success online. So there's no rules, and embrace that. Let's talk quickly about the different structures that a web series can have. So like I said, serialized shows are telling a longer story over a season or 2 or 3 or however long you want to structure that. So those are, as a TV equivalent might be like a Lost or a Battlestar Galactica. Reese, which started off as a web series and moved to television, same idea. There are also procedural shows. So that would be like an X-Files or a Star Trek episode that sort of tells one story in an episode with characters that you see every episode. Now it can have sort of arcs, your cigarette smoking man arc that kind of goes through different seasons, but for the most part, each episode stands on their own. Lastly, there's anthology series, which really the episodes stand on their own. Usually characters only appear in one episode, you don't see them again, and the seasons are really connected through sort of a theme. So like I mentioned, Black Box TV is an example of that, Twilight Zone, Outer Limits. You can also sort of structure your web series as a feature film that's separated into chapters. That's a model that some people use. It's easier then to put all the episodes together onto a DVD, video on demand, so you have some different distribution outlets. You look at Crackle, they do a lot of their web series that way. The new series Chosen is sort of split up like that. For our purposes, I'm going to treat that sort of like serialized storytelling. So one season is a feature film, and you'll be telling a story that arcs over that length. Okay, moving forward, I also want you to think about what subgenre might your sci-fi series be under? You know, are you talking about time travel, this post-apocalyptic tale? Gene Roddenberry always describes Star Trek as sort of a space western, so that's sort of a subgenre all its own. And the reason I want you to think about that is you can use some of the conventions that audiences might be familiar with to your advantage. You know, if people know sort of how time travel works, you can kind of skip ahead to the parts that make your series different. Lastly, I want you to think about tone. That's sort of the attitude that your show has. What's the worldview that you're coming into it as a writer? Is it hopeful, optimistic? Is it cautionary or tragic? Are you satirical? Are you trying to make people laugh with the show? You want to make sure the tone stays consistent throughout your series. Now, we all remember those like very special episodes of sitcoms, right? The Saved by the Bell where Jessica gets hooked on the caffeine pills or whatnot. Those always felt a little bit out of place, right? Where they got really serious all of a sudden. You don't necessarily want to have those tonal inconsistencies in your show. Now, a series like Star Trek, of course, did a great job with that. Sometimes they could tackle, you know, race and gender issues along with multiply and triples. You know, they could go back and forth. So if you want to do that, you can pull it off. Just be aware. Okay. For the assignment that I'd like you to do for this section, I want you to go through and write down who you're writing this for, okay, and why you're excited about writing this idea as a web series specifically. I'd like you to choose, in a broad sense, how you'd like to structure your series, whether it's serialized, procedural, anthology. What subgenre do you think your series falls into? It can be a couple different ones if you think that's appropriate. And lastly, what's the tone of your series? So once you've answered those questions, you're basically putting together what the premise of your show is. Okay, you've put together sort of what an elevator pitch of the show is. Elevator pitch, of course, is if you find yourself in an elevator with a high-level executive, you want to be able to quickly tell them what your idea is before you get to your destination. So that's essentially what you're creating by answering those questions. So reflecting on those questions, I have the last assignment for you here. I want you to write the log line of your series with a title. So go ahead and give your series a title if you haven't at this point. The log line it's a sentence or two or three that just quickly summarizes what your show is about. Some examples, of course. Star Trek starts every episode basically telling you what the premise is, the Enterprise, exploring strange new worlds, boldly going where no man has gone before. The Cybergeddon series on Yahoo that I mentioned is about an FBI agent who is framed for this cyber terrorism crime that she didn't commit. And so she's trying to figure out who framed her and stop them from doing more harm. Halo 4, Forward Unto Dawn, the Machinima series, is about a cadet who teams up with Master Chief after his academy is attacked by the Covenant. And so I'm just going to read you the log line for the series that I'll be writing along with you so that you know what that is. The show is called Spelunking, and it's quantum leap with a postmodern twist. It's about two roommates who are trapped inside their favorite TV shows, forced to create new endings, hoping to get back home. So that's the premise of the show that I'm going to be writing along with you. I'm pretty excited to tell it. Hopefully you'll be excited to read it. Come back with us for the next section. We'll be talking about how to build the world that you're going to be setting your series in. I'll see you then.